because I never looked at it the way how he explained it. I remember there was a Oranienburg Town Council, Shekero Trea at the time. He was a Minister of Trade and Industry. And we were fighting for the implementation of the Rent Control Board. So he is the one who must implement the Rent Control Board. But he had an application to build flats in Oranienburg. So in other words, he was applying for land in order to become a landlord, for which he must administer that law, the rent ordinance. They were very reluctant, so he wrote an objection there to the town council. Maybe we must check how far they went. But the interpretation was that Article 42 then meant that because if Chekorotwea could become a landlord, it was going to be very difficult for him now because he's going to be regulating himself. So that's the interpretation. So in other words, I only looked at that you cannot be a Minister of Education and run a private school. You know, something like that you're supposed to be regulating. But I never looked at it the way how he explained it, to say, no, it is not just in conflict with your line of work. It could be any other information. It just doesn't mean that if you are Minister of Justice, because you are not dealing with the fish, you can now become shareholders in a fishing company. No, because the information when it comes to cabinet, I'm interpreting this when I'm actually thinking about it. Because when the information comes to cabinet, it comes to all of you. It's at your disposal. It does not matter whether the Minister of Education also received information on fishing quotas. So what does it basically mean? That it basically means technically, and maybe that's why we must have a conversation and see. It technically means that these guys cannot be in business at all. By implication, it's not just, you are not only prohibited to do business in your line of work. It basically means that you cannot be in any situation, because if you are maybe selling whatever it is that you are selling, but information comes to cabinet that no, government is planning to put up an oil storage, and the hell of a sudden you are in construction, you have a shareholders in a construction company, and then you ended up being. So I think this is a conversation that Namibians are not having. We should, from today I'm thinking differently, because the information comes to you. My thinking was just limited to say, you are a minister of, say like Rastus Utoni, you cannot be a developer of housing, and you are a minister of housing. But it also means that Rastus Utoni also received information from Derek Classen, is presented to cabinet on these things, on projects. It basically means that no member of cabinet must somehow have any connection with the green hydrogen or whatever project that by implication. So that's just my interpretation as I'm thinking, because he managed to stretch my imagination. But also, if technically, if the report of the Ombudsman is stable, it's just that our country is so weak that all laws, cabinet even have a committee. And I keep raising it, people don't understand what I'm raising. But I find it very problematic. Not that it should not happen, but how laws are made in this country. There's a cabinet committee on legislation. They have a committee on legislation, which is a core function of another arm of government. So they draft those laws. After they draft those laws, they reach consensus in cabinet. And the deputies, by implication, also agree. Immediately when the deputies agree, it will mean about 40% of the legislature has already agreed, because they sit there. So after that, they go in. The only bill that did not originate from cabinet in this country is a land indigenization bill that we tabled. And they sent it to the committee. Everything else comes from cabinet. Yeah? We have not seen a bill, even from all those parliamentarians. They are MPs, they're supposed to be going to the communities and say, this is a bill to give land to the common people. You take it, you bring it, you table it to parliament. They don't. Everything else comes from that cabinet. And so what is the purpose of parliament? Then they are all there standing up, I want to debate this, fighting each other, but they are all debating things that are coming from cabinet. All they bring there is questions and motions, questions and motion. But a bill, the Constitution made provision for a private member's bill. A member can bring a bill. But have we seen that bill? Certainly, I have not seen it over the past 10 years. So, it then opens us when that report is tabled in Parliament. Of course, we also have a responsibility. But who picks it up inside Parliament and say, this is what the Ombudsman said? It is very interesting. I know I have not gotten a response yet, but the office remains. People go, but the office remains. You know, Adiba Toivo was allocated a farm, and the wife was not happy about it. And she decided to apparently exchange. Now, in terms of our resettlement policy, there is no those things of exchanging. The advert goes out, people apply. But in the process of application, somebody throws in an exchange. So you come and double the rules and change them. Here, applications are coming for a resettlement farm. Another person comes and says, no, that farm that you have put up for resettlement, I want to exchange it because I'm not happy with the quality of the houses. And then the requirement, one of the requirements is that you must be previously disadvantaged. Vicky Atoivo, I'm sure maybe she's an Namibian now. She's an American, we know. She's not contemplated as a previously disadvantaged Namibian. So those criteria that are there, previous ombudsman called me and said, Mr. Mupanda, I've been preferenced by Madame Atoivo. Obviously, she's the wife of the struggle icon, and I think she's still employed in the Ministry of Labor. That's why the revolutionary women probably having problems. But when you think about it, if they were fast, but they don't want to stretch that imagination because they have still not done a lot of work, because every law must be administered by somebody. So the writers of whatever bill must write it in such a way that it must be administered by somebody. So I'm just highlighting this as some of the, because Mr. Bassi has stretched my imagination how sometimes we are thinking very narrowly. Because all those reports, it means all those MPs are sitting with those reports. They are sitting with those reports. What is happening with those reports? Could we do better? I mean, it could. When I was a mayor in the city of Windhoek, I found that there was no respect of the office of the Ombudsman. There's quite a number of complaints. You know, in that place, we do a lot of things. Like a person becomes number one, and then a person wants to double. There's a lot of, I think there are 2 cases that are still standing. So we called a meeting with the investigators there in the official. We told them, this is a constitutional office, you must comply. They've just been ignoring the office of the Ombudsman. But we have also successfully complained, just like the matter of that Yatoivo matter. We never got the response until today. But we have challenged many things, reported many things to the Ombudsman, and the Ombudsman office investigated, and there was compliance on quite a number of issues. But we should also then, as citizens, see what we can use from the office. If there's a finding from the Ombudsman, I mean, I was reading, I don't know whether it's the Ombudsman Act, but I don't think it will be the Constitution, because it says that the Ombudsman, the person occupying the Ombudsman actually have the status of a judge. I don't know where I got that, Kabila, but there is something like that. Martha also have track of the online question. I'm going to open up questions, interventions, suggestions.
My name is Oscar Iko. The Congo is my statement. I'm coming the other side of the red line, to the communal line. My issues is more relating to the environment. My issue is relating to more to the environment. One of the duty for Office of Ombudsman, we have a communal land that the purpose was only for agriculture purpose and they received them. We have issue, my question is more relating in terms of illegal sand mining in the northern, particularly in my constituency. Since 2018, we forced Ministry of Environment to arrest people who are doing illegal activities, especially our business community that are doing illegal activities in our constituencies. We always saw compromising order that issued by environmental commissioners. Until today, we never heard anyone will be fined or be arrested doing illegal activity. My second question is regarding about that. Since again 2020, we have also receiving the same issue regarding about minings, sand minings, when we also more like Ministry of Environment or just emphasizing regarding about poachings. When it's coming to illegal sand mining, we always ignore that point. We put pressure on the Ministry of Environment, especially the ministers in the environment. He issue a comprising order to the business community. While issue the comprising order, people ignore, business community ignore the comprising order that was issued to the commissioner, continue doing the illegal activity. We, youngest and fearless community members, deciding to writing a letter straight to the commissioner office, where we CC your office. We don't know whether you're receiving our letter, because we never get any response from commissioners in the office regarding about arresting the people that ignoring the comprising order that was issued by environmental commissioners. Again, they also, we don't know where is our mandate, whether we come into office or we deal direct to environmental commissioner and the Ministry of Environment. Because we don't want, in 50 years to come, on IPA constituency will become a desert, because we have more than 15 illegal pits that is not rehabilitated, it's not defaced. That is our more concern about environment. What is your role in terms of this illegal sand mining or illegal sand mining that destroying environment? What is the position of Office of Ombudsman?
My question is, one, does the Ombudsman only get involved when called upon, or he can also get involved even uninvited? Two, I was conditioned in such a way that those human rights in the Constitution cannot be amended. But if I heard you very well, you said unless you are adding value or you are making it better. So in other words, it seems like it can be amended. But of course, we have that property, access to property. One of those that thing needs to be addressed, because it cannot be right that we have people that I have traveled from the last house that side until the last house that side. But you see how things are degenerating as you can see how things are degenerating as we move from there to there. So there's no dignity there, there's nothing there, there's nothing there. And as Ombudsman, in your report, perhaps, I don't know whether you propose, you suggest, or whatever you submit to Parliament, and you said you are almost like a proxy. So does it then mean that perhaps you have the right to propose that article need to be amended if it means that to add value to it, because to relate it a bit, because at the moment it's really chaos. But also we need to admit that we have a rotten capitalist system in this country that has been failing us for all those 30 years. and it needs to be addressed. What is the position of Ombudsman? And perhaps also so far, how many, how can I say? So far, how many complaints did you receive? How many did you take up? So just an update perhaps on what is happening in your office so far.
It's written like that. You have a right to housing. The word housing would be, I think, in chapter 3, our version of chapter 3. That's why in South Africa you can stand up and go to court and enforce it. As they put it in 95, and they put 101 to say this cannot be enforced. But maybe in answering that question, I'm hearing the Ombudsman also saying you have a right to acquire property, isn't it? In Article 16. Yeah. Now, I'm trying to imagine, so how I looked at it, you have a right to acquire, so you can. But I'm actually beginning to think that, is it not possible for me to stand up and say, I'm unable to exercise this right? Because of government policies or because of what is going on. Therefore, there must be recourse. Because we are only looking at it to say, you have a right to go in that room. You can go if you want. Like you can say, you can get out of my house. But what if you will lock the door and I want to get out of your house? So is it not possible, perhaps to ask to, I'm now beginning to think that, what if my right to housing, my right to property, which is the house, is inhibited by government inability to, or by a local authority? Can I, so if it's not possible for us to turn it around, because we are only using it in one way. You have a right for housing, but go and look for it. What if I don't find it because there are limitations? And where must I go? So maybe that's also something that we can, I just thought I would, because I picked it up from where you are talking about, yes, it's in 98. It cannot be enforced there in 98. But how about property? We understand that property, housing can also be property. And you have a right to that, a fundamental right for that matter. But what if I cannot exercise those fundamental rights? Take an example of education. Education, primary education shall be free and compulsory. You have a right to that. If government is failing to do, that's why some parents threatened to go to court. As a result, the government quickly went to implement free primary education because they haven't implemented it, I think, for the first 20 years or so. Yeah. So in other words, if your right is inhibited, maybe that's a conversation. If we cannot answer it today, perhaps we need now Kavetu, Kadira, and others to interrogate what then happens if my right to property, which is a housing, is inhibited by government policy.
My name is David Uzo, and I'm the chairman of the Matrix Council Youth Group. You are going to see me this year very often in your offices. What I would like to ask is, coming from the background of tradition, I specialize into tradition. So I will ask you regarding to what is your stance on tribalism, nepotism, racism in the employment sector, as well as economic sectors. Now, the reason why I'm asking you this very interesting question is that this is a ticking time bomb that was planted by colonialism and then currently practiced by our elders, between brackets. Why? We are all coming from certain regions. For example, you are coming from Capri, coming from Kavango, for example. Dr. Job is coming from the northern regions. I mean, he is coming from the southern region. And that's how the segmentation is done. For example, if there is employment for the police force and there is 10 positions, 8 of them will be from the northern, 8 employment positions are going to be filled by the Northerners. Why? I mean, this I speak based on the research that I've done. It's the same into economic sectors. Again, the northern regions. Here, I'm not trying to divide the nation, but Dr. Job knows, I mean, I'm straightforward when it comes to this. Speaking from the traditional background, there's certain, I mean, let me not take over your, what I can ask you straightforward is, what are the policies that you are going to implement so that this ticking time bomb must not explode one day when we are going to grow up? Because currently what is happening is, for example, my tribe, which is now falling under the Damaras, as you know, the stance, you were talking about equality in terms of economic equality, in terms of certain resources that must be given to everybody. But currently, my tribe, which is the Damaras, speaking, I'm not trying to be tribalist. What I'm saying is, coming from the background of tradition, we are not economically supported as by the policies and the blueprints that you have. So what are the policies that you are going to implement in terms of now furthering traditional authorities to be recognized as well on the level of the common law handling? Thanks.
My name is Kavetu. I'm the area head of legal. I think I had various correspondences with your office. And, at one point, we had a meeting scheduled which never took place also. I have 5 points to raise with you. The first issue is the issue of the office of the Ombudsman's independence. You know, in terms of the Constitution, the office must be independent and only be subject to the Constitution itself and the laws of Namibia, which should be the Ombudsman Act. But when you look at even your budget as an independent office, your budget comes from the Ministry of Justice, the same Ministry of Justice which you must also investigate in terms of their administrative actions and performance. If these provisions that subjects your office to even their budget, what subjects your budget to the Ministry of Justice are contained in any other relevant laws, whether it's the Finance Act or even in the Ombudsman Act itself. Why don't you think it will do justice to the office of the Ombudsman to even challenge the constitutionality of these provisions that subject you even to ministries you are supposed to investigate? Because there is no way, if you have to send out the investigators who are either complaining about even the Ministry of Environment, for example, the manner in which they issue the enforcement orders and all of that. But you are limited in terms of any other laws, or your independence is subjected to. For example, the Ministry of Justice is supposed to release funds for you to even investigate the Ministry of Justice. Because I think that's the starting point as the new Ombudsman going forward. You need to ensure and protect your independence as contained in the Constitution. That's the first point. The second point is you highlighted correctly that in terms of your role as the Ombudsman, you prepare a report which you refer to Parliament for debate. But there's a second leg to that, and that is where you can approach the court to either correct the wrongs that are being done, or to seek an interdict to stop the wrongs that are being done. And I think the office of the Ombudsman all over the years, the public, something probably Namibians have witnessed from the office of the public protector in South Africa, is that the Namibian Ombudsman is hardly in court. I want to know personally, and I think each and every Namibian would like to know, what is the fear of the office of the Ombudsman to approach courts? Because you will only learn in terms of even your powers, because they argue, the previous Ombudsman used to argue that your powers are quite very broad, and it makes it very difficult to enforce. But for lawyers, when you are given powers that are broad enough, you should be accused of abuse of power. You shouldn't be scared of the broad powers imposed in terms of the constitution to your office and limit yourself. So my point here, which I think the office of the Ombudsman should take home, is we need to see the Ombudsman much more in court. If there is a complaint, we refer the complaint on the appointment. I refer the complaint on the appointment of the Deputy Labor Commissioner. Yes, Deputy Labor Commissioner to your office. Your office wrote, they communicated with the office of the Minister of Labor, who indicated also that he was misled and didn't follow the law in the appointment. But nothing was ever done after that. We saw that the position was advertised. We complained about the process followed in the appointment of that individual. We don't know whether the person meets the requirement, and that was not our argument also. But you realize that the same person got reappointed after the re-advertisement. But I think what should ring the bell in the mind of the Ombudsman should be that if processes were not followed previously, the person was appointed, probably they made the requirement, they were best performing, but probably we don't even know whether there were interviews conducted. But I think the Ombudsman will be seen by the public to have done your job when you come back to the public and also just report that you see this position was re-advertised, interviews took place, or this and this happened. This was the best performing candidate in terms of the outcome of the interview. Even a press conference. I don't think I have not seen a provision, in fact, in terms of the Namibian Constitution that establishes the office of the Ombudsman, which gives or which makes your work confidential. You are only subject to your act and the Constitution, and I have not seen much provision, probably not in the act, but not in the Constitution, that makes your work quite confidential. My third point is the issue of investigation. Upon a complaint to your office, you investigate matters. But one thing I've learned in my career as a lawyer, I've realized when you have powers, there's a second leg also to your powers to investigate. You may investigate on your own accord. There are always newspaper articles, as you have indicated that journalists are the best investigators. If there is a newspaper article indicating that the certain minister of what has business interest in what and what, or is doing whatever, there must be, I think the work of the Ombudsman must be out in the public. If you write a query to the Minister of Works to inquire on any of the issues that is reported in the media, it should be reported. I mean, you should also respond to the public that you are investigating this, or you have written to the minister to explain this and this. Because the moment you start writing your letters, you file them in your cabinet and what, you are accountable to the Namibian people. And if you don't communicate to the people, we will never know what you are doing. And the next thing that will be thrown at you is that you are captured also. And the fourth point is the issue of environment. I think the young activists here touched on the issue of environment. I think going forward, you need to sit with the Ministry of Environment. You need to clarify your two roles. Your powers in terms of the Ombudsman Act and the Namibian Constitution on your role regarding the environment is quite very broad. But the Ministry of Environment has certain specific powers. But it's not clear what is your role when it comes to the protection of the environment. And we have seen even these environmental impact assessments that are being conducted, even in Opuo there. Those are, and these public consultations that take place. We have seen those people, they come, they speak to 3 people, they report that there are no objections, or in fact, what you would notice is that there's a newspaper article that they are planning to build, whether it's a dam or whatever they are trying to build, no objections are received, they go ahead. And the same happens with these environmental impact assessments when it comes to sand mining. The community members, how on earth do you just, the next morning when you wake up, you see those politicians in the north are just digging behind your house, and then you are being told the person has the license. It's obvious that person would have objected. It's either we need to change our ways of, these are some of the biggest key issues that we need to see the office of the Ombudsman taking. Without, you will never receive complaints from Namibians. Namibians complain to newspapers. I think you need to start, I don't know whether, and that ties in with your budget. If there is anything that limits you from getting more money, you need to challenge it. If Ministry of Finance is giving you little money, you need to go to court. You need to see the office of the Ombudsman go in court, and not the affirmative repositioning.
My name is Saki Elawu, and I'm an activist of the Affirmative Repositioning. First of all, I would just like to thank you, sir, for making time to engage us and keep pressing issues that we face in media. I believe that, protesting and marching to the private residence of public office bearers should be the absolute last resort in a democratic country like Nigeria. This is what public office bearers should do more often. So, on a day, on my good hair day, I would have taken my head off for it. But as an alternative, I salute you. Yeah. Nevertheless, let me just go to my question. I have 3 questions for you, sir. The first question is regarding accessibility and education. I want to know, perhaps, what programs do you have in place going forward with your office that makes accessibility to your office easier for aggrieved persons or organizations? You see, the way I understand the institution that you are leading is that basically it's supposed to be an institution that protects the rights, basically, of citizens from across the board. But, in all practicality, my understanding is that your institution would most probably represent specifically one group in practicality. Why do I say that? You see, Karl Marx tells us that society is divided into 3 classes. You have the upper class, the middle class, and the lower class. Now, I think it is well justified to assume that the upper class and the middle class would rather not approach your office in the event that they are aggrieved by something. Rather, they have the means. They will go to the legal representatives, and they can afford litigation. But the lower class was probably the group that would be knocking on your doorsteps. What programs do you have that makes accessibility easier for those people? For example, let me say you have a group of cleaners in Tandi, in the northern part of Namibia, that are aggrieved by, let me see, something. How do you make accessibility easier for those people? And then again, we go to education. What programs do you have in place to ensure that people are educated about what your institution does? If you go to my location and you mentioned the Ombudsman, most people will probably even think that you are probably referring to a tribal group in the language of the Bushmen. So what I basically just I personally come from a disadvantaged background. Of course, English is not my language, but I usually hear people when they reach a certain status in society, then they say, no, I come from a disadvantaged background. I'm still there. So I'm contemplating on whether that is even the right terminology to use in this case. But nevertheless, I'm one of those persons that believe that education is the greatest equalizer. So if it is the greatest equalizer, it should be accessible to all. Now, in 2016, the government declared that secondary school education is free, basically, from 2016 onwards. However, the challenge is that when you read the Namibian Constitution, specifically if you look at Article 20, sub-Article 2, it's quite clear that primary school education should be free. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but my layman's interpretation of that sub-article is that now primary school education is not a privilege, but it's a right. Right? But that applies to secondary school education, because the government says that secondary school education is free. Now, what worries me is that declaration by government is not incorporated into the Namibian Constitution. Now, my question is, what is your view on that? Do you perhaps think that there should be a constitutional amendment to that effect? And then the third question. The third question is basically, who do you think, or let me not say who do you think, because that's a very dangerous terminology to use. Who are you accountable to? Who are you accountable to? I think that are you accountable to the public? Are you accountable only to the legislatures and the president? And then finally, my last question would be, what is your view on the public, the popular public opinion that the Ombudsman, the Office of the Ombudsman, is merely a loud barking dog without teeth? Yeah.
Let's start with the issue of environment. Fence mining, for example. The complaint procedure and the role of the Ombudsman. The Constitution only talks about the Ombudsman has to protect the environment. So this is one of the mandates where the Ombudsman don't need a complaint for him or her to actually take action when, by look of things, out of his own volition, he can take action and approach the authority to correct the damage that is being done to the environment. So, in other words, we are aware that there is the Management Environmental Act. In that act, there is a body, I think it's called a Commission of Environment or something like that.
Environmental Commission.
I think it's a council, yeah, environmental council. So the commissioner is an individual, but there is a council there. And this council is appointed by the minister, and the act actually give guidelines as what type of institutions or individuals coming from which institutions they must compose to form that council. So my suspicion is this is the body that actually helps to do more than the Environmental Commission in terms of protecting Namibia's environment. So when I got to the office last year, a few days later, I went to see the Minister of the Environment. My suggestion to him, which I put on the table, is that because when you read the Act, the Ombudsman is not mentioned in those environmental councils. So I told him, you have to amend the law if it need to be. If there is nothing to amend, I want the Ombudsman to be a member of that council, because I want to see what's happening in their deliberation, for me to be positioned myself to see how I can advance the protection of environment. So maybe I answered the question of another gentleman who talked about how I work with the Ministry of Environment in terms of that. I picked it up from there that only when I get to that answer from the minister, because I thought that my proposal is a serious one. If it needs to be, he must take it to cabinet, and otherwise I will take it to myself there. So that's my approach. Now, sand mining. Yes, I'm not so sure whether we have a formal complaint in my office about sand mining. But the procedure is like earlier indicated. Legislations are there in place for you to follow those legislations first and exhaust the procedure stipulated in that legislation of the Environmental Management Act. So I think you are correct to approach the Ministry of Environment first, or the Commissioner of Environment first. Only when you will get to the deadlock there, the dead end, being ignored or be given a final letter that nothing is wrong here, then you can now come to the last resort. Because I talked about that the Ombudsman actually is a last resort in all in actually administrative issues. These are administrative issues, although it is linked to environment, but it emanates from the actions of the public official who is refusing to implement or to execute his duty. So that's the element of environment when it comes to this sand mining issue, because there is somebody who's issuing this environmental clearance certificate or whatever you call it. So from that angle, we don't take it as a violation act. We now take the route of someone who's in a public office, appointed or elected, who's not executing his work. So that's how we will first of the law, we have that power to approach the court. Actually, on a few grounds, to interdict the authority from actually carrying out activities that will actually harm the human rights of an individual or his interests, or the interest of the, like I said, of the environment itself. So we can approach the court on those grounds. It is not really to say that the office or the ombudsman has not been in court. You must remember, as the 7th ombudsman, as I said here, there were 6 others behind me. And it's just a pity that sometimes these things, it comes at a certain time when it becomes relevant to the population. And that's basically what I pick up also in my lifetime, that the office has been there since 1990, 32 years old. So the aspect of going to court, there are cases in places that where the ombudsman has went to court. And once the matter goes to court, it's actually public in terms of our law. Any matter that goes to court is public. I'm not so sure whether maybe it warrants to make a press conference and say we have won this case, etc., etc. But I hear you, but I'm not really one of those people who believe in publicity. I believe in a motto that says work hard in silence, let your results make noise. Not you who's doing the work, but the result must make noise. So I believe in that, but maybe in this portfolio, I have now to balance the two. Yeah, I think to answer that question of sand mining is actually where I can pack it, because I have picked it up from newspapers and etc., but I'm not so sure whether I have it. You must remember that the Office of the Ombudsman is actually, like I said, it has been there and it's big. Most of its work doesn't really reach the Ombudsman himself. It's resolved by the investigators. And they are very competent individuals. So the Ombudsman sometimes never gets to see small cases that are actually straightforward for them to resolve. One day, if it comes to our office, we will then handle it the way I explained it. Can the Ombudsman get involved, or only if he is invited? I think I answered that one. Maladministration issues, misappropriation of funds. These are challenging cases because you need someone who is actually giving you the correct information. So, for you to actually carry your investigation. And if you just get it from the newspaper, you probably are not going to get to the bottom of the whole issue, because you are not having someone who's having the in-house information. But with the other issues of human rights violation and environment, yes, I said we can act without actually anybody asking us to act. Even going to court, we can also do that without anybody asking us to act. Chapter 3, the amendment of Chapter 3. I think what I said is that, and this is what they told us even at the university, that this chapter is prohibited by another chapter, I think it's 131, I'm not so sure, those who read the Constitution can say so, that it cannot be amended without the two-thirds majority of National Assembly. But even that, they also say that you can only amend it when you add the good thing about it. You add more rights to it. But you say, no, people must not have liberty. When the government wants you to be at home, you must just get home. So that's actually how they taught us at university. That's the amendment we are talking about. But you know, as lawyers, sometimes we read, you know, the law, the beauty about law is actually the meaning of the word, the definitions of the word, and the concept of those words. So if you go to that article I mentioned, 151, you will find elements there that talks about you can amend any provision of the Constitution. But let's leave that one to the respected jurists, the Supreme Court, to get to that point one day. Because I remember during the Land Conference, there was that debate. People wanted to propose an amendment to Chapter 3. And they said, we are going to propose it in the conference. And then we will see how it will go, you know. But coming to the conference, my recollection serves me very well, everybody shied away from that proposal. Nobody proposed an amendment. Because we want to believe that this document is actually our gem. It's not good to amend this just like that, you know, left and right. Otherwise, it will just be an ordinary book also, or ordinary document. I can tell you that even those liberal champions of democracy, like the United States, their constitution is also difficult to be amended. If you go on your Google, you will see that since its inception, out of if I remember my information, out of 1100,000 proposals they made to the American Constitution, only 25 went through in the last 200 years. So that tells you how difficult it is to amend the Constitution, which they think it is actually that keeps them together. So I'm not so sure what was the question all about on the amendment. Maybe it is about the aspect of the right to property and the right to housing. But that one you can go around within the Constitution and find an answer there. Because when Article 95 says the right to housing is actually a policy which will guide the government or the government of the day. But I told you about 16. 16 says everyone has a right to acquire and alienate individual property. Now, how do you do that if you cannot enforce it? Remember the case of this labor thing, this labor hire company. What is it called?
Labor hire.
Personal
Yes.
They got away with that aspect of keeping that business because of the provisions of Article 21, which says you can trade in any business you want. And then, but you see now how the law plays around. The lawmaker says, no, this thing is discriminatory, it's reminding us of colonialism. But here comes the judges and say, no, no, no. Anybody has the right to trade. You see. Now, how do you now trade if they refuse you to trade in certain areas? So basically, what I'm saying is,
can a prostitute go to court? Using 21.
What I'm saying is, the Constitution is fine. All what we need to do is really, we need to lobby our politicians to understand that this Constitution has so potential that it can provide the good things to the citizens. But we are not really doing that. So we are actually reading where we are comfortable to read, and we read the other parts. An economy. But I can tell you that every system, there's no perfect system. But capitalism, as it was correctly said, by nature, it is the mother of inequality. But it's also the driver of the better life of every citizen. I will explain my point by giving you an example. China, why it is the second largest economy today, is because of capitalism. You know why? Because the Americans helped China to get there. What happened is, China before, they didn't allow private business to flourish as you have it here. So now the Americans were pushing the Chinese that you have to leave people to have the liberty to do business as they want. And then the Chinese, they said, okay, maybe that sounds better, but it is on our model. There will be private companies, but controlled by the Chinese. So they created this Alabama, they created these Huawei's, they are all over, international. So they raise millions of dollars, but then they bring it back to China. And that's actually where you see today Chinese all over the world. The reason why they are second in the biggest in the economy is, in every country you will go, there is a Chinatown. There is no country on the earth where there is no Chinatown. And these are individuals doing business there in your understanding. But all of them, they buy from China through Chinese policy, through Chinese government directives. So it is a mixture of capitalism and Chinese system. So actually what I'm saying is capitalism is actually good for flourishing of goods and for people to be freer to engage in a business they want. So this is basically what capitalism is all about. But I'm not really painting capitalism as the best system. I think I made my point earlier that it is actually also what is causing the, by nature, it is actually the breach of inequalities. If I can share the statistics of the Ombudsman with the audience, yes, I can share with that statistics, but I don't tell you. What normally happens is that we report every year to the National Assembly, to the Speaker of the National Assembly, and we put that statistics in that report. But you are welcome as a citizen to come to our office, and we will share with you the statistics, because you must remember that the other question that came from there is that our work is not, there's no way he read in the Constitution that it is confidential, but it's actually confidential in terms of the act. Confidential in nature that individual complaints, the act, we can go into detail, we can only reveal the details of the complaint with the permission of the complainant. So it is there in the act. So, but what we do, what I do now is this. I'm having courtesy visits to various institutions and ministries. I go with this report and I remove the names and I tell the head of the office that we have received 200 complaints from your ministry. Just for him to have a picture. But if he wants details, we can provide him with the details. So that's basically not something we don't share. We do share the details. Traditional authority, tribalism, nepotism, etc., particularly in employment vis-a-vis the provisions of the Constitution. This is a very interesting question. I will tell you why. Anyone here who is 32 years old, if you are 32 years old today, obviously you have been at 1990. I was born in Zimbabwe. I went to school there. I finished my school there, and I finished my university, and I went back to Zimbabwe because my parents are there now. And I applied for a job there. Now the same name Dyakugha doesn't sound Herero or Damara or Tswana. These people will they say that I am not from Zimbabwe. That's the challenge we have in Namibia of today. Because that's the only home I know. I don't know anymore that village in Shadkongo or wherever you can call it. Because and this is basically where we need to shift our mind as Namibians. Because you cannot now today look at names and language. I mean home language, because language is Namibian, we speak English, but we sometimes they ask also this home language. Maybe we must just delete that thing in the application form also, so that we just put English there. But the challenge there is that they want people who are multilingual, so that you can assist the customers of various backgrounds. So, to answer your question, I have picked it up as I'm visiting regions. It's a very big challenge. What is happening is exactly as you put it. It's coming even from the top politicians. They are saying, no, we want to employ our people. Okay, you want to employ your people, but what about this person? I gave them this example. What about this person? Where is he from? because he doesn't know any other place except here. You see? So they can't give me the answer. So I don't know, I don't have the exact answer for you there, but it's seriously something that we need to look at and because the Constitution actually I think it's a complete document in my view. What happened is when the frame of the Constitution were drafting this Constitution, they foreseen all those things. That's why the Public Service Commission is there. Public Service Commission is a chapter on its own. It's chapter 13. So it is to make sure that there should be fairness in employment. Don't look at the language, ethnicity, and tribalism. That's basically the reason. Even the dismissal aspect, they wanted to see that it must be fair. That's the role of the Public Service Commission. And not only that, the Constitution brought in the issue of administrative of justice. Article 18, you can approach the court when you are discriminated against. So I think Namibia sometimes they are very nice people. They just throw in the towel and throw in also their right without actually taking it far. So I applaud those Namibians who take the government task and say, no, I'm not going to take it. I'm going to take it far. And there are those cases that went to court and it was losing their faith. And by the way, when that thing happened, some individuals have been arrested for perpetuating nepotism, in employment, where the cases are clear and straightforward. I think that's my answer to that one. So we, from my office, I think what we are going to do in this matter is, if it needs to be that we need to amend the law so that those who are getting away with administrative immunity, I'm going to propose that one. At the institutions where I'm serving as a commissioner at the Law Enforcement Development Commission. Because there are two immunities in life, particularly in Namibia: the criminality aspect and then administrative aspect. Others, they get away with criminal offenses and others get away with administrative aspects, which also is seriously affecting other people's rights. I mean, rights and interests. So they both have to be. The moment the path that we are having is the one of criminality, you go to court, you go to jail if you are found guilty. But the one of administrative aspect, we recommend for the dismissal of those officials if they are found to be guilty of administrative misconduct. So maybe not enough, but we can see how it gets out of hand. Independence of the office. I thought I spoke about it. I don't know how I missed it, but the independence of the judiciary and the independence of the ombudsman, like I said, the Constitution really is a cut and paste language of Article 78 and 89. But it took 25 years for the judiciary to be where they are today. They were also like ombudsmen. They were hanging in the Ministry of Justice. And they took the route of gentlemen's negotiation until they got there. Finally, in 2015, they got that the Judicial Service Act, if I'm not mistaken. So I can now announce to you that the previous three ombudsmen before me, they pursued this aspect of independence. And they left it very, very far, maybe towards the end. There is a bill now, which is at an advanced stage probably just a cabinet committee on legislation that will actually address that issue of independence. So that bill is much, much thicker than the current legislation of the Ombudsman. So it talks about the autonomy of the Ombudsman. I think in short that is the answer to that question. The issue of approaching court to stop violation, I think I addressed that one. What is the fear? Yeah, you see, let me add to this one, the issue of going to court. For all these years, the Ombudsman were doing his work quietly and maybe vocal in some aspects. But then there was a time when they probably didn't do their homework correctly to read the law before they went to court. So what happened in this case of Frederick Vela is a 2020 case. It's a full bench of high court case. It's online, you can get it. The Ombudsman went to court because an individual, I think that's Mr. Miller, went to the Ombudsman and said, no, I'm aggrieved because the magistrates convicted me on a wrong charge sheet. And then the Ombudsman is a lawyer, of course. He looked at it and then said, yeah, no, it's wrong. How can they convict you on a wrong charge sheet? We are going to appeal. So then they put their appeal, they wanted now to represent him on the appeal. They picked it up and said, no. The Ombudsman doesn't have that power to represent the citizens in court. So he brought in the case to determine the power of the Ombudsman. So the case is actually Ombudsman versus the Prosecutor General's case. But when you read it, it's actually another case. So the court there made it clear we don't have those powers to represent individuals in court, whether civil or criminal, or give them legal opinion, formal legal opinion. We can give them legal opinion in the office. They say, in terms of the law, this is your right. You must do this. But we can't put it in writing and say, you can go and use it. The court made a determination on that. 3 judges were sitting on that case. So, in my view, it's a directive for us as how we should actually handle cases in court. The labor cases and labor commissioner cases. You see, this one is similar to the environmental issue, where the Environmental Act is in place. The labor law is regulated by the Labor Act of 2011. Is it 7 also? I'm not so sure which 7. So what happened here is every individual, you're supposed to have a contract that actually guides your relationship with your employer. And once that contract comes into dispute, you then have to approach the labor commissioner to resolve that one. So what we do in my office as an ombudsman, we wait for that process to unfold to the end, so that we combine both the labor issue itself and then how the labor commissioner actually handled the matter also. Because the labor commissioner is also a public official, so we include him in our investigation. So we look at that whole process. And we have, at the moment, it is one of my priority institutions where I have a lot of issues with that institution. But I have not yet reached the back. So I'm actually busy gathering information of that nature, so that when I will pay a courtesy visit to this office and to the minister, these are the issues that I will address. If, like I said earlier on in my introductory statement, that the labor issue is one of those areas where this government is actually struggling to find its figures how to handle it. Because in the first place, they just withdraw the whole law, throw it away, bring a new one. But in my view, this one is more frustrating even. With my experience of being a labor advisory person, I can tell you more about that. So that's basically how we handle labor law. We don't really come in as a first instance. We wait for the last resort. Okay, I think I handled that issue of whether we investigate cases on our own involvement or initiative. Environment, yeah, I think I also handled that matter on the issue of how the relationship between my office and the Ministry of Environment. Let me go back to the question of private companies or multinational companies that actually violate the labor laws of this country. We, as an ombudsman, I also still have those powers to get into the private multinational companies. But by law, I don't have the power to investigate private institutions. But the moment it affects the human rights aspect of a citizen, I have those powers. I think my approach on this one, the way I will move forward, is from the international point of view of human rights. Because international law and human rights dictate that those companies must respect the domestic laws that govern labor relations. So if Chinese companies or mining companies, wherever they come from, they don't really respect the labor laws of Namibia and the human rights aspect of it. The ombudsman have all those rights just to approach it from that angle and intervene. But then we have to have a formal complaint in that nature. Since you need to investigate the actual complaint in terms of issues that which is happening there. This is basically where it comes in that your employers should actually be treated like humans. They cannot just be dumped there in checks while you are making millions of dollars. You don't provide them with decent accommodation. The first week of February, I went to the south, and for some reasons, I went to a local plantation there. And I discovered that it does not even belong to Namibia. It belongs to a foreign company, a foreign country. So the manager was there, and he took me into the field, and we drove in his car. And I noticed that he has built decent flats for his workers. And I asked him, how did you do this? He says, no, because we are serious in business. In my country, we don't have land, we don't have water. So this is what we do. We go to other countries, we get land, we produce our food, we take it to our country. So therefore, we have to do everything right. So that's why we are treating our workers right. So that aspect is actually not about this country not having land. It's an international law. You have to respect the local law and treat workers decently. So the other issue, accessibility of education. This is a very interesting one, but I have a meeting with the minister tomorrow, so I think you have to give me time to go and sleep. Otherwise, I will not raise many issues. I will be tired. Okay, I think the way you ask the question is it's very complicated for this session, but I will say this. In the Constitution, you are right that it only talks about primary education. Now, in a normal, serious government policy, parents that don't send their kids to private school, they're supposed to be locked up. It's supposed to be a criminal offense for you not to take your kids to school. The government is supposed really to enforce that aspect through the inspectors, local leaders, etc., etc. Now, the issue of whether you want to make secondary education free, university free, it's a political decision. And it's good for the nation. In a country like Namibia that has resources, there's nothing wrong with that. The challenge we have is that we made the decision, but we did not put our heads together as how are we going to finance it. Education is very expensive. It's not a job. Because there's a lot of things there, not just a classroom, chairs, teachers. Transport is supposed to be also available by the government to ferry these kids who are coming from far remote areas. That is what's supposed to be in education if you really want to take the chance. Because transport can be an obstacle, particularly in the weather like this one, and in winter. So education is really serious, not a cheap business. But I'm not really going to go into detail on this one because I have so many issues that I can share with any Namibians who are a policy maker, or of course you as an activist you speak to policy makers. But come to my office, then we hear many things on education, including health. This thing together, put it together, is one. This world is actually complicated for you, for your generation. Back then, it was not that complicated. Because what is happening now in the global world is that this business of education is actually not free. They don't want it to be free. They want it to be a business. This is why you have private universities, private schools. This is business. This is pure business. You go to London on what scholarship of a University of London. You think even they gave you a scholarship? It's a business. Because what you are going to spend there is more. That way, it is health is in the same bucket with education. It's a business. That's why before I was when I finished matric, there was no private hospital. When I finished my matric, but today, government hospitals are lesser than private hospitals. So what does that tell you? So, yeah, I'm inviting you for a coffee, and then we go into this day. Yeah, I think I talk about to whom I am accountable to. No, you must just read your constitution. I'm just accountable to the constitution. Unfortunately, the constitution has to make a provision how to appoint the ombudsman. But once the ombudsman is appointed, he is just accountable to the law, to the constitution. So this aspect of reporting to the National Assembly is just a process of how you should do your work. You must remember that the office of the ombudsman, there are over 100 offices of the ombudsman in the world, and they operate more or less on the same model. So, yeah, when I go on leave, I don't really put in leave because nobody will sign it.
Harmony with the character 3 Jewels of right of the Namibian Constitution, specifically Article 10. And the second one is what is your take? What is the take of the Ombudsman on some companies that introduces mandatory vaccination? The third one will be, what power does the Ombudsman have in Parliament? Okay, what power does he have in Parliament? Did not act, and he did not act on the complaints of the maladministration he picked up. There is an issue in SA where the public protector wrote to the institution that maladministration and requested them to communicate back, but was overruled by the court that he does not have the mandate. Is it not the same to his office here in Namibia, or does he have the mandate to follow up and ensure the problem of the nation is solved? I think that's it.
Everyone, I just want to find out the act. I know the act was amended. How far is that process? Should be complete by now. I think it helps with the independence and autonomy and all that. So how far is it in terms of its tabling to Parliament and all that? The other issue is the issue of respect in the office. I remember last year I engaged Mr. Walters, and he gave instructions to the public affairs minister, Mr. Leon. And I think one of the instructions was for August 26th to be compelled to table its audit report in Parliament. That was ignored completely according to the former Ombudsman. So we have these MPs who don't really respect this constitutional office. How do you intend to navigate regarding that? The other one is just a comment on the issue of publicity and accessibility of the office. I think as an office you need to do more in that regard. And because you say you have your own style of operating, and in this business publicity is key, accessibility is key. Your office must be available and it must be seen. I don't know. We call the 121 constituency because people really need those services. Yeah, your comment on the vaccines. I think the NDM is not really breaking down on mandatory vaccination of soldiers. What is your stance on that? Yeah, the issue of the red light. It's an open secret to you. You are from the other side of the line, like many of us. What is your position on the red light? You know the division it brings, the rights that are taken away, the economic and socio-economic implications that it has on those people living on the other side. Are you going to bring the AR movement in trying to the red light?
My name is Comrade Innocent. I just live in Kapitura. Young man who's actually what I'm going to do is an intervention, not actually question. Because a lot of people have asked questions and I have a lot of questions. Ombudsman will never finish my question. So actually just intervention. What troubles me a lot, it's like I'm a young Namibian who's so interested in leadership. So interested in leadership in which I wanted to engage talks with Ombudsman to help us when it comes to the area of leadership. Because I'm aware that a country like Namibia, at the moment where we are, we have a lot of politicians, thousands and thousands of politicians, but few leaders. That now makes me so scared because where we are going and look at the situation in the country, it's very, I don't know what word should I use, but I want Ombudsman to help us in leadership. Because this country really needs leadership more than politicians. Because we need leaders to help us to light a tunnel, the light when we are in a tunnel, when we are in darkness. We need leaders to help us, to show us direction. Because, let's just look at the situation on the ground in Namibia. Poverty is the talk of the nation. Unemployment is our national anthem. Crime and all these social problems we don't just finish talking about them. So, as a ombudsman, I just want you to help us. What is our position as, in regards to leadership in this country? Because you are just focusing a lot of things that you are doing. Actually, to me, I just see it cheap. Because the most important thing that we need to fix in this doctorate. But today, as we are talking today, is living in Germany, yes, political refugee in Germany. While Franz Indongo is a Namibian who at least recruit young Namibians, at least almost every town in Namibia, he has a garage. Now, look at the leadership. The person who's educated, working for people outside the country, employed as an economical refugee, while somebody who has one doctorate in Namibia is helping young Namibia. So, if you really consider that, you will see that the problem we are facing in this country is leadership. Not all these things can be fixed if we just fix that one part, leadership. I know I have a lot of things to say, and I wanted to say it in the right way, but due to time and the situation, I'm not just comfortable wanting to speak my heart out, but I had a lot of things that I needed to say. So I don't know now what time maybe you will still have time like this. I really have a lot to say, but thank you.
My name is Jeremiah Finger. I'm an activist. So I have one comment or two. With a due respect of two leaders that we're having here, which is Ombudsman and Doctor, I'm speaking from the perspective of economic and a business fraternity, that as a country rated by Fitch and Moody and the International Monetary Fund, as much as by the Transparency Corruption Index. So our economy for quite a number of years is growing. However, we have this upcoming African Free Trade Area policy. So imagine the interpretation of this policy is African Free Trade Area policy. And then we do have what we call condone phase day. So as an ombudsman, if you connect these dots together, what is the perspective fruition are we going to get out of this? Lastly, in terms of the Transparency Corruption Index and the office with those three organs in the country, the executive, judiciary, and legislature, that's supposed to be independent. However, we see and we're watching that these three organs are not independent. And I remember some years back, in a case of Jack Huang, I read a letter that the executive had a meeting with some judges. So, which means the executive interfering in the business of the judiciary. So, what is your take in that case? Thank you.
I have only two concerns. I don't know if this is a question of concern. Thank you that I'm even meeting the Minister tomorrow of Education. When I was in grade 6 and 7, there were two ladies that dropped out of school because of unavailability of beds. Okay? And just last week, I think, I saw, I don't know if it was a campaign, now like a mountain way in Namibia that beds, everyone is doing a donation, even the former minister did that. So why it's a must have to a lady to have beds available, okay? But now someone in Windhoek now street will go by black chain, get free condoms, then go back home and do whatever they want. But our ladies in school, they are dropping out because of unavailability of what the human needs. So maybe what you do about that?
So in other words, girls don't have a choice about their periods.
They don't.
But you have a choice to
either to have it or not
to have sex. But you get free condoms from the government.
From government.
To exercise choice. And another person is not getting anything from government to respond to biology.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
That one now. Thank you for clarification. And the other one is in Namibia, where graduates become tourists of interviews, especially on the education sector. A person can be invited to 7, 10 interviews. At the end, they will even be tired. Like, why? I'm done. Why I'm always helping? But do even the president get that pension fund? 1.2. Do we get it? Because everyone who is 60 and above is supposed to get that.
Yeah.
But now we have unemployed graduates traveling to interviews, but they don't have anything. Why can't we maybe what's your intake on that as the Office of Ombudsman?
Mr. Bass, when you ask whether or not social justice is being set in Namibia. So interestingly, he said he doesn't also know. So I would like to think social justice is not safe, and I can qualify my answer. So if you look at the very first article of our constitution says Namibia is established as a secular, unitary, and democratic on the basis of democracy and justice for all. Now, it's very good that he even quoted the John Law, who said justice is a fair distribution of resources. But now the question is, are our resources being distributed in a socially equitable manner? And I would say no. Because justice says you can even formulate policies for positive discrimination if possible, if it is to benefit the most vulnerable members of the society. Now, if you look at policies like maybe affirmative action, black empowerment program, it benefited those on top. So these comrades are comparing themselves to whites. But if you look at the food chain, they are basically on top of the food chain. Now, you take me, you take Ali, you give us fishing quota, then we become overnight millionaires. Now, how did that resources benefit those the grassroots level? So, if the elites continue benefiting from this program, then there is no social justice in the country. So, I have a question to the Ombudsman. Particularly, he mentioned that his role is accountable to the Constitution, to protect the Constitution. Now, in this presentation, where Doctor also touched a bit, we talked about the issue of serving personal interests when it comes to our cabinet ministers. So it's a public knowledge that we have cabinet ministers with their immediate family members engaging in business activity. You hear the company was registered 2 weeks ago. The project is being launched now. That company is awarded the contract. You can sense something is not right. You can clearly see that somebody was tipped off or was informed in advance in order to benefit from this opportunity. So my question is, if it's more like politicians are behaving like spiritual leaders, they choose verses which benefit them. So politicians also choose parts of the Constitution which benefit them. When you confront them, how come your child got to this tender when they are established company which we know can do this better? They will say, no, my child is an adult by the Constitution of Namibia, has the right to engage in business activity. So on the part of the Ombudsman, you know that there are parts of the Constitution which are ignored, particularly on the conflict of interest. They have the information from the cabinet now shared with their immediate family. What option is there for the public to make sure these things does not prevail? It's a common knowledge in Africa, like immediate family member of the politician happen to be the richest. It's a trend which clearly shows that some part of the Constitution are ignored. For example, excusing themselves from involving themselves in business activity.
I can highlight my mandate anchored on three pillars: maladministration, human rights, and environment. So the red line issue, I don't think I have a personal view there, except that my official capacity as a ombudsman to feel together with the majority that are excluded from the economic mainstream of the country. So the question is whether I will join the fighting the removal of there is an important aspect of my portfolio that I don't have a client who say so. I'm impartial in excluding my job. It is stated in the Constitution. I have to be impartial when I'm excluding my work. Now you will see that in this case, there are other Namibians also opposing, and there is other Namibians who are wanting to take it. So I have to sit on the fence as an officer until the time it comes to an individual aspect, an individual person who will say, no, I've been discriminated based on this and this. That's the time then I visit to that person, and then we investigate the case in terms of the effect of that case. So basically, that's my answer. Mandatory vaccination. I was asked this question maybe twice. The first time I was asked to make a statement which was sent to the print media, and the second time I was invited in the community radio, district radio. I think some of you are listening to that. My view on mandatory is clear. It's in terms of the Namibian law. When it comes to health issues in this country, it's an individual choice. And it is also in the history of medical practice. If a younger person is to be operated, consent has to be given by the parents. If an adult, but terminally ill, he cannot consent himself to be operated, a family member has to give consent to be operated. And also, there was, his brother, blood brother, told him to get blood transfusion. And this person says, no, it's against my religion. So, but the brother posed the issue and said, no. Just give him the blood. I'm saying so because he don't leave the kid alone if she dies. So I'm not so sure about the case, what happened there, but I know the case what happened. The church members, they took the matter to court to defend this particular individual, not to get blood transfusion. And it went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court actually ruled in favor of the sick person that no, it is his choice not to take blood transfusion. So in other words, what I'm telling you is that when it comes to medical, it's an individual choice. When it comes to COVID, we are confronted with a situation where we are now confused. Whether we're still in the traditional way of dealing with medical issues, or we are now in a different area of international politics. So that's where I will leave it. That's actually in my book. You remember the case of the famous tennis star, Djokovic. He actually breaks the silence. Just go on your device, you will see what he said. So it is individual case. That's the traditional way of medical. The power of the Ombudsman, with example of the South African situation, I think we need to read laws in all the little details. The situation of South Africa is actually different. It's not by name only, but also by legislation. They have combined it with the anti-corruption aspect. They don't have the anti-corruption commission there. The public protector is the anti-corruption of theirs. That's why they have that setup. But when you look at the setup of the Ombudsman of Namibia, it's pretty much the same all over the world. And I tell you why it is designed that the Ombudsman's report cannot be enforced in court. Because in any country, only one institution must enforce policies and legislation, and that is the executive. Those who have been given the powers by the electorate. So the Ombudsman is not elected, it's just appointed. So that's why you see even the judiciary, which is the traditional branch of government, when they make a ruling, the one who must enforce that order is the executive. The police are part of the executive. So I think you understand what I'm trying to explain. If you have a situation of Ombudsman has given that power to enforce his report in court, then you will see a situation like in South Africa, where I will also just be kept busy in court fighting to enforce my report to enforce my report in court, because other individuals will challenge my report and say that report we have issues with it. You understand? So they will go to court and challenge it. But at the moment, in terms of the law, my report is final. No one can challenge it. Parliament just National Assembly Parliament. Parliament is actually the one that is failing the nation, because they're supposed to take the report of the Ombudsman seriously and give oversight to the executive. That's actually how the Constitution is designed, the checks and balances aspect. So that's why you will not see anybody, even if it's in the Constitution, they cannot take me to court for doing my work. It's taken in court, and then there's that deadlock again. So I think, in my view, the approach we took is the right approach. The amendment to the Ombudsman Act, yes, I spoke about it. There is a bill now, it is really at an advanced stage. When I spoke to the Minister of Justice, who is the chairperson of Cabinet Committee on Legislation, he says if things goes well, that bill is going to go to Parliament in the first quarter of this year. So there is really not much left about that bill. Publicity, yeah, this question was asked earlier, maybe I just missed it. Outreach program, we have outreach programs that takes us to the region, and then we explain our role and our work. We also have offices in other regions. Currently now we have 5 offices in the region: Terongo, Karas, Utemenyupa, Oshana, where? Zambezi, yes. So we are working on actually increasing these offices into the regions. But the challenge we have is cash flow. So we are a public institution. We are not sponsored by the rich companies who are pushing our Asian techniques to other across the Atlantic Ocean, we will get also our share from the cake that actually caters for education and other things. So that's the challenge. We cannot really accelerate this process, but it is our wish. It's just a pity that the office has been there for 50 years, but some people have now just begun to know about it all of a sudden. But that's how things is. It's human nature. Leadership. Well, this is a complicated space, but I don't have a mandate on leadership. Perhaps what I can say is, if you want me to talk about the issue of leadership, maybe you must also invite me at another platform, and then we go into detail on what leadership is all about. But it's not my mandate to talk about what type of leaders you have or what type of leaders you should not have. But I can share my views about leadership as a subject matter on an academic level, if I can put it that way. I hear you what you are saying, because the thing here is, as Namibians, I think we need to appreciate the fact that we should also not really just demand from your government what should your government do for you because you are suffering, but we should actually also put the question the other way, as it was done by, the famous statement from Ben F. Kennedy. What are you doing for your country, actually? So this is basically where it comes in, that we have those individuals who are actually not even educated, but they have great employment for this country. And I'm really disappointed with many individuals who have benefited from government tenders, but if you go to your checklist, they have probably not employed 10 people, just 10 individuals. I don't know what they do for money. But a poor CRO somewhere in Namibia, he has 20 employees because he is having a brick-making business, is having suing this government business. So you can see that we actually have to look at other Namibians, what they are doing good, so that we can also take an example from. Which is fine, but in the end, we are not really doing anything for the country. Because, as you know, we have a private university here in this country, which is owned by Namibia, maybe with the joint ventures with other Namibians. Those are the ideas that we supposed to come up with, rather than actually looking upon the government that is the one that must employ us. So, I don't have the mandate on leadership. The African Free Trade Area, well, I heard about it. I must tell you that I also was part of the Namibian team that went to finalize some of the documents on Africa Free Trade Areas. When we had this meeting in Dakar, in Senegal, I am positive. I think Africa is moving in the right direction. But all these things have to do with the leadership that we talked about. If we are going to have time, we talk about leadership, because you must remember that leadership is just not leadership. You must have visionary leaders, people who think. Today in Africa, I'm not talking about the continent because you talked about Africa, free trade area. There is not something tangible that actually has done by the leaders in how many years, 50 years of experience, that benefits the continent. Maybe this is the first one. But in terms of infrastructure, zero. I will tell you an example of Europeans, the Americans. what you hear as Panama Canal is a man-made canal. What you hear as the Immense Channel is a man-made connection between France and Britain. You can drive from France under the water, you go to London. It's a man-made idea. So Swiss Canal is a man-made canal in the north, in the Middle East, somewhere there. What did we do as Africans? Big project of that magnitude. Nothing. So it's not so easy to celebrate about Africa free trade if we cannot go far at static level. We have not gone far at static level. So yeah, I'm positive, like I said. But yeah, let's leave it there. Well, the others will just comment on the resources. I've already talked about it, whether it could be distributed fairly or not. I don't have the answer to that one. The same with the cabinet ministers, awarding in tenders, and what with the. It's not really also in my mandate there, but the only area the Ombudsman will have a mandate there is when there is a complaint of this nature. And you must remember this will be investigated based on individual facts. So if the minister really awarded himself or herself a tender, that's actually the area of my sister institution, the corruption, the anti-corruption commission, because in terms of our law, it's a crime. So it's not necessarily the ombudsman's mandate. Yeah, I think I have answered all the questions, but thank you. I will leave you with a homework. You must read the book. The name of the book, The Game of Life and How to Play It. The Game of Life and How to Play It. It's written by Florence Scofield Sheen. Florence Scofield. Scofield is Scovill. Sheen is Shinn. A book of 1925.
Advocate, for availing your time to be with us this evening. I know it was quite very short for those who have more questions to pose, and to those who had other things also to contribute in terms of on their outlook to how you should implement your mandate as appointed by the President, and also as set out in the Constitution. I think one of the highlights that stood out that was very clear from here is that you are only subject to the Constitution. And I think the biggest failure in terms of the implementations of matters in faith in the office is Parliament by failing to forward this to the executive to ensure its implementation. And that comes from your reports in Parliament. I think we need to take those reports that the Office of the Ombudsman submits to Parliament quite very serious. We need to have a proper follow-up, not only as citizens, but maybe also from your side. You need to find some sort of clarity on how they should be implemented, because you cannot just be submitting reports and then they affect the way. I think that those are not that's not the constitutional intentions of our founding fathers. That the Office of the Ombudsman should just submit reports and be pushed aside. If Parliament is not acting on them, maybe there is something more you can do. Maybe approach the court to compel them also to do something about it. Yes, and one of the biggest roles and highlights for the night, I think it's that you are here to protect fundamental rights and freedoms of the citizens and not to defend the state. And I think your eyesight everything should be from that point of view. And I would like to also just thank our viewers out there. Thank you for joining us and tuning in with your questions. We hope, due to the limited time, the Office of the Ombudsman was willing to capture and answer most of your questions. Please don't forget to join us next week. We will announce who will be joining us again on this platform. Just follow our Facebook page, our social media, all other social media pages. I thank you and wish you a good night.